Hello, this is Teri Lou with myiPadLive.com, and I'm going to be doing these videos demonstrating the power of the iPad when processing images. This past weekend my daughter got married and I had taken some images with my iPhone, and I wanted to show you one of the images I captured and process it in two different ways using Snapseed and Filterstorm, two of my favorite applications. So I'm in Snapseed right now, and I'm going to open an image in the album Wedding Processing ×2, and I'm going to select the first image. And the first thing I like to do when processing an image in Snapseed is going to the Image Tune folder. So within the Image Tune folder, you have the choice of brightness, ambience, contrast, saturation, and white balance. Looking at this image, that's got plenty of brightness, especially in the dress. It might even be a little too bright, but I am going to bring in some ambience, just a little bit. All of these are going to be real subtle moves. I'm not trying to do too much that would stand out, so I'm just going to bring in a little bit of contrast. Don't want to bring in too much with people. A little bit of saturation, warm up that skin. And then when you go to white balance, again, here's a little bit of warmth and here's a little bit of cool. And I'm thinking just a tad bit of warmth looks pretty good in this image. So here's the before and after. You can see they're just very subtle changes. You might not even see any on the screen there. So I'm going to apply those. And this is now going to be a layer that I'm going to use. So I'm going to save this layer. And then move on to the black and white folder. So in the black and white folder, you have different presets. And I'm going to check out and see about the contrast, which looks a little bit too much for me. So I'm going to stay with the neutral filter. And then you have the choice of going into the contrast and add just a tad bit of contrast right here. So that's where I'm going to go, is just add just a tad bit of contrast. You also have these filters, and I think they are not doing pretty much anything that I want to do in this image. So I'm going to just stay with the neutral filter, and now tap apply, and this will be my second layer. And I save layers to be able to process the image later, and I'll show you how those layers will be used with processing this image. So after now I have these two layers, they are saved in my camera roll. I'm going to go into Filterstorm, and I'm going to load photo from my photo library. I'm going to go to my camera roll this time, and I'm going to first start by loading the black and white image. One of the features I use in Filterstorm a lot is in the filters, I scroll to the bottom and add exposure. And I'm going to add the exposure of the color version that I first did in Snapseed. Now what I'm doing is I'm creating a layer underneath this black and white photo, so I actually can paint the the flowers back in. So I'm going to tap the Fit to Image, and now what has happened is I'm in the masking part of Filterstorm, and I have the black and white image on the top and the color one below it, or underneath it. And I'm going to expose those flowers underneath by brushing them on. So the first thing I'm going to do is zoom into the flowers nice and close, tap on the brush with a low opacity and not too big of a size, start to paint back in these flowers. And I'm going to paint them in right up to the edges. I might go over a bit and then erase it later. And I'm just going to paint in the flowers. There's some over here too. And I'm not being real careful at this point because I'm going to get in and zoom in a little bit closer when I get to the erase tool. So now as I zoom in, I can see some of my areas that I need to erase. And in this case, I'm going to lower the size of the brush just a tad and be able to paint or erase the parts that I don't want colored, because I just want the blue flowers colored. Get rid of some of that green on the leaf. And in this case, I'm going to check and see if I missed any of this blue, which looks like I did. So I just tap the brush really quick, come back to the blue, hit the eraser, touch up a bit. I'm going to move over to the largest hydrangea. Oops, should have tapped the eraser instead of the brush. So now I'm just going to erase. And again, getting into all these little crevices where I don't want the color to show through. I just want it to show through on the blue flowers. Looks like I might have missed some blue flowers up here, so I can fix those up too. And erase a little bit more in here. Now for this demonstration, I'm not going to spend a lot of time showing. I just want you to see the process of me moving back and forth and zooming in and moving the image around with the zoom tool or the move tool. And you can see that you can create an image just exposing the blue flowers. There we go. Now I'm going to save this. In the processing, I'm going to actually use my photo library to save it, export, and in my settings I have it set up where I automatically confirm this information prior to saving. Always do the highest quality JPEG and the most available megapixels. So since this was shot with an iPhone 4S, I have an 8 megapixel image that I'm working with. So it's going to sit here and process for a little bit. You can see that it's changing using the double exposure, and then it basically is using where I brushed it in, and it's brushing. Next I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into Snapseed and I'm going to process the image that I just did. And so I'm going to go back to Open, go to the photo library. It'll be the last image in my photo roll, or my camera roll. And now you have the flowers right there, all in color. And I could have done this before, but I'm going to choose to crop the image. I think that it could be a little more centered, that I didn't get done when I was capturing it, so I'm going to move it over just a tad so it stays even between her dress and his foot, and I'll apply that. And at this point in time I'm not going to save that as a layer since I know I'm almost done. Going to put a simple white frame over the image. My favorite style is usually in frames 1 or 2. When I'm in the frames, the frame width offset, I usually put up to the lowest amount actually, and the frame width, I think I'm going to add a little bit of black around there, apply that one, and there we go. One way to process the image using Filterstorm and Snapseed. This time I'm going to use the same exact approach. I'm going to open the original image that I did in Snapseed with the few changes in the image tune. So this is the image that I'm going to start with again. It has the image tune adjustments made. And this time when I crop it, I'm going to crop it into a square image using the 1:1. Move that up. And then I crop them in pretty good. So after cropping this out, I will be losing some megapixels, so this won't be an 8 megapixel image anymore, but it'll be plenty, especially for what I'm going to do with them. Right now we're waiting on getting the photos from photographer, the professional hired photographer, and so I'm going to process some of these for Facebook for my daughter first. So now I have a square image, and one of my thoughts is that I would like to give it a blurred look so the focus gets a little bit more on them. So I'm able to use the blur strength and bring that in. Now I'm going to do a pretty strong blur strength, and in this case you have the blur strength, the outer brightness, and the inner brightness that you get to work with. So the blur strength is the first thing I'm going to start with, and I'm going to just blur it just a tad, and I think I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. Let's see if I bring in the circle. Really pay attention to where I'm blurring. I don't want to get their faces out of focus, but I also am trying to keep those trees from also being in focus. The one thing nice is you have the outer brightness, and I'm now going to be able to just darken the image and be able to focus more on them. And the inner brightness, I really don't think I'm going to add any brightness to them in particular, but I'm going to see if I bring this in just a tad bit more and maybe raise it up a bit. I think I like it pretty much right there. You can see the flowers really in focus, and you've got a nice outer edge that is dark and not taking away from them. So I'm going to now apply, this was actually the before and the after, so you can see it's a dramatic difference, almost kind of like a vignette, bringing them in. So I'm going to apply this, and again I'm going to be doing all of my processing of this image in Snapseed. So in the case that I wasn't sure if I want to go back, it's sometimes easier to save the layers as you change folders. And my reasoning for doing that is since Snapseed, if you do want to go back with just one step, you can't. So I encourage you to save layers as you're going. The next thing I want to do is darken that sky a little bit above the groom's head. So I'm going to use the Selective adjustment tool, and I'm going to add a control point right around in this area here, and just trying to focus in on just the sky up there. Now, unfortunately, let me see if I can hit the compare before and after. Okay. Well, unfortunately, with the new iOS change, this is going to be fixed soon, but the save successfully ends up staying up there. But if you look carefully, you can see the dot above his head is definitely going from bright to lighter without affecting anything else, since the circle is just affecting the red areas that you can see behind the successfully saved. So I'm going to also, I have the contrast and the saturation. I won't need either one of those. I just wanted to darken the bright sky behind them. So after you process it again, it does get rid of the saved image. And if you see, you can compare it. Oh, it goes all the way back. So you can see that if I was to revert, I'd have to start all the way back here. And this is where I came with the image. Last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a frame around it. Again, I usually use frame 1 or frame 2, so I'm going to start with the offset, go all the way up, frame width just about in there, and apply it. You can see before the frame and after the frame. And there you have two totally different ways to process the same image using Snapseed and Filterstorm. As a review, I'll go back to the photos. So here was the original before the image tune, and then we have the image tune, turning it into black and white, adding the flowers. And the last thing I always do to my images is put my copyright in the lower right hand corner, so that's when I know that I'm done with the image. And then that was also cropped. And then for the second version, I have the bride and groom cropped in a square with a blur around them. I darken the blur a little bit more. I darken the sky, and I put the border around it and put my copyright on. So I hope this session was helpful for you. Again, this is Teri Lou with my iPadLive.com, and if you have any questions, you can send me a question through my blog at teriloublog.com, TeriLoublog.com. Thanks, and have a great day.